Thank you for joining us this morning as we explore San Francisco's urban staircases. My name is Jessie, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at Greenbelt Alliance. For those of you who aren't familiar with our work, our mission is to educate, advocate, and collaborate to ensure the Bay Area's lands and communities are resilient to a changing climate. The work we do to protect the Bay Area's natural and agricultural lands while also creating thriving communities, as well as this free outings program, is made possible by you. So please donate today, which you can do so securely on our website at greenbelt.org/donate. And during the outing, please feel free to ask questions, and we will answer them at the end. You can use the chat function or Q&A function, and I'll kind of keep track of that as we go along. We'll also be sending a follow-up email to everyone who has registered, and that will include a link to the recording of this event. So note, we are recording it, and you can look out for that in your inbox, which should arrive later this afternoon. And with that, I will hand it over to Ken, our wonderful outings leader, to get things going. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessie. I just want to remind everyone that we have another virtual outing next week, next Saturday morning. It's the 100th anniversary of Mount Diablo State Park, the 100th birthday. So we'll have a program, Garden of the Jungle Gods, and we'll talk about some of the amazing cultural and natural history of Mount Diablo. But today we have a wonderful program, and lucky to have Zena Kolbe-Saltzman as our presenter. She's a garden and floral designer based in Oakland. Born and raised in San Francisco, she spent 5 years after college working at gardens around the world, including Longwood Gardens, Royal Botanical Garden Kew, and Stellenbosch Botanical Gardens. Upon every return to her hometown, she is continuously amazed by the number of different plants that can grow in our urban environment, and is passionate about sharing her knowledge and connecting with others interested in fostering environmental consciousness in the Bay Area. So Zena, without further ado, you're on.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. So as Ken mentioned, I'm going to spend this morning botanizing the Saturn Street Steps, which are urban staircases in San Francisco. As you mentioned, I am a San Francisco native, and one of my favorite things to do in the city is just walking. And as I've gone away and come back, my eyes have continuously changed as I'm able to ID and identify what I'm seeing around myself, and also connect to what it means to have all these different plants in the city. And so not only is the city just gorgeous because of its architecture and all the things that, it makes San Francisco famous, but there's all these hidden gems of staircases and little mini parks, and that we're able to have such a diverse plant palette is incredible. And part of why we're able to have such a diverse plant palette is because of the microclimates. So the city is full of hills, obviously, and that creates a bunch of different surface areas, which then, we'll have some areas that are a little warmer or colder, shadier or protected. And so that really the plant palette is just extensive in that way. The city is in a Mediterranean climate, which is one of 6 and 7 throughout the world. So you can see that there's a bunch of different areas around the world where we have the same climate, but the soil is what's different. So as you walk around, you can end up seeing a lot of plants from the Mediterranean basin and South Africa, some Chile and Australia as well. And then also the other part about the city is the fog. So what the fog really does is it actually is very much like a cloud forest. So a cloud forest is, generally a higher elevation forest that has low-lying clouds, and then also condensation. So we're not obviously not as tropical as that, and we don't have the fog all the time. It's not a consistent presence in the climate. But that being said, it's generally there a decent amount of time, so that allows for those species to be able to thrive. And especially if you live in an area that is especially foggy, you can often get away with, I've tied a tree to a tree fern in my parents, or I mean, I've tied an orchid to a tree fern in my parents' backyard, which I haven't set up any water, but because of the fog, condensation keeps occurring. And so it's getting light amount of water. But so cloud forests generally would have a lot more epiphytic plants, which means that they grow on another plant. And also fuchsias and begonias, and a lot of different plants that they really love the fog. So as you can see, the picture on the left is actually in San Francisco, and then the one on the right is in Costa Rica. So, I mean, we're not as tropical by any means, but I think we can give them a run for their money for the thickness of the fog. So just to repeat a little bit more about myself, so grew up in San Francisco, and I attended UC Davis, where I studied horticulture and French. And then from after college, I interned with Friends of the Urban Forest for a little bit, which was really interesting. It kind of got me really interested in how the city, how the sidewalks and the plantings on the street really incorporate into the city. And then after that, I moved to Maui for about 8 months and worked on a property there. And then from there, I was an intern at Longwood Gardens in their conservatory, which it turns out that all the plants that they're growing inside, we grow here outside. So I was working under glass there, but then I would come back and all the plants that I was working with under glass were growing outside here. So I actually was just learning more about Bay Area plant palette, even though I was in Pennsylvania. After that, I went to South Africa for about 4 months, and I worked at Stellenbosch Botanical Garden. And so that's in the Western Cape, and that was, just to be in one of our Mediterranean climates and to see how similar it does look, as well as to be able to come back and start to recognize just the amount of plants that are growing in the Bay Area that are from South Africa. Then I went to Kew Gardens and studied there, which was, just to be at the center of horticulture and to have that scientific knowledge all around me through the organization was just really inspiring. Currently, I'm a garden designer for Magic Gardens Landscaping in the East Bay. And I also manage our nursery, as well as I buy from about 40 to 50 wholesale nurseries throughout California, as well as up in Oregon. And so with my new position now, what's been also interesting is I'm learning about what plants that I'm seeing are available in the trade. So not only learning about their nativity, but just, what is actually rare. And so that's just been another lens that my eyes have gained. So today I want to do a couple of things. I really want to just kind of illuminate the wonders of the plant selections in the city, and how incredible it is that we might ignore or not really necessarily pay attention, or be curious about the plants that are surrounding us and where they're from, because they do tell a story. There's plant fashion, so you can start to see trends of when things were planted. Another thing that I really do want to showcase is the juxtaposition that we're able to achieve in the city by being in a very, feeling the energy of a commercial area. With now the energy's coming back, but being able to be at a restaurant or a bar and really feeling that energy, and maybe sometimes feeling overwhelmed by it, and then being able to escape very quickly. to the calm of a garden or a green space in just one walk. And then the third thing I also want to do is just to go through what characterizes different plants and how they affect the environment. So just being able to just look at them and what they're really bringing to the space. So yeah, obviously we're doing this virtually, but if one was to do this walk, I'd suggest starting in the Castro at any of the restaurants or bars and just really feeling the energy that you really get in the Castro. And then just walking, just a short walk to the Saturn Street steps, which now I believe that even 17th Street can connect right off of Market. I used to do this walk very often to get up the hill because I had a friend who lived in the Haight. So I would walk from the bottom and up, which is how I discovered this staircase, and which is why also it's kind of a special one to me. So yeah, you can see kind of, here's another map of where it is exactly. So it's just off of Ord Street. Yeah, so this is the bottom of the staircase, and I just want to go over why the different plants, what they bring to the environment. So there's habitat for animals. So, you know, in the one thing to consider here is no animal that's not in the environment already in the space is going to just come because of something that you plant. So, you know, animals love to hide in little nooks and crannies. So by creating different heights, you're able to provide them the environment that they might enjoy. So that being said, just because you do that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you'll have, you know, some animal that's not already in the city. So, you know, in this case, the animals that are in the city often are raccoons and skunks and rats. So also knowing which plants will actually increase that versus decrease that is another helpful thing. But water use is another thing I want to look at. So yeah, just here you can see there's a decent amount of succulents, and there's some other Mediterranean plants that are generally low water use. But no plant can go with no water, especially not when it is first establishing itself. So the xeriscaping, so landscaping without any water, is you know, a really good trend that has started to develop, especially with our droughts. Just know that that doesn't mean that there's no water, because no plant can survive forever without any water. The other thing I want to talk about is the pollination season. So by planting plants that aren't necessarily native, and by having a variety of the plants that you plant, you're playing around with the season of when things bloom. And what that does is that then, you know, classically things in summer are in bloom or spring. The aloes that are from South Africa, they actually bloom late winter, early spring, when not much else is in bloom. And what that does is that then it provides food for hummingbirds when they wouldn't usually have any nectar. Natives, of course, it's, you know, by incorporating natives into a landscape, you're really protecting the environment, and you're allowing for the native pollinators and birds and animals to feel kind of comfortable and safe. But also by planting one, you are already increasing kind of the use by the animals in the environment. So as much as, you know, all natives could be incredible, I think there's also incorporating a couple of them or some of them versus everything being them is another option, as long as the choices that you are making for the other selections are responsible and just thoughtful. Because lastly, human health is definitely something that we need to take into consideration, because this environment is also for us as well. And that humans like interests, and we like colors, and we like textures. So being able to find the plants that we can utilize that will provide those things is also important, and it's another part of the environment. So this is a picture of a couple things. So in the foreground, you can see Agave blue glow, and you can see Aeonium species, and in the back, you can see yuccas. And then on the right, you can see Leukodendron Ebony. So Leukodendron Ebony is actually it's in the Proteaceae family, so it's a South African, and it's that cultivar in particular is pretty sought after in the trade, and is very slow growing. So this is Aloplicatilis. So this is from South Africa, and it's an Asphodeliaceae, and it blooms in winter and early spring. And in nature, it actually forms a pretty big trunk. And the word plicatilis refers to the folded nature of the leaves. And so it blooms in winter and early springs, like most aloes do. And that provides food for hummingbirds, which is really great. So any flower that is more tubular, you can generally guess that probably a hummingbird is gonna like to stick their proboscis in there. This is Senecio Madrelensis. So this is another South African, and this is actually an Asteraceae, which for me is always amazing because that's the daisy family, or I guess it must be Compositaceae now. So just that the succulent is in the daisy family is pretty cool to me. And it blooms in summer, and it attracts bees. This is Crassula Ovada, and it's also native to South Africa. So you can start to see how many things that we just have kind of incorporated into our landscape are actually from South Africa, and Mozambique as well. And it's in Crassulaceae, and it blooms from winter to spring, and it also attracts bees, or bees will pollinate it. I don't think it attracts them necessarily. And this is Beschneria Yacoides, and this is an Agaveaceae. And so this is just a really, it's definitely such a dramatic moment to walk past these, and they're probably 5 to 6 feet tall flower inflorescences, which is an inflorescence is a compilation of different flowers. So each of these different flowers all together is called an inflorescence. So Yacoides, so if you ever see the word oides in a species, means that it's like that. So it's yucca-like. So here they actually have really soft leaves, so they can provide that kind of a stately look to them, just like yuccas, but actually are soft, which is very useful for when it's next to where someone is walking, so that it doesn't poke anyone. And these are also pollinated by hummingbirds. And then this is Euphorbia Dendritis, which has a pretty wide range of where it's native to, but a lot of Mediterranean countries and into North Africa. And it's in Euphorbiaceae, and it blooms all throughout the year. And so when I say blooms, it's actually interesting because all those green flowers, they look like flowers, they're actually bracts. And I'll get to what a bract is, but so those are not actually true flowers. And this is a picture of the Euphorbia Dendritis in its native habitat. And so it's just pretty incredible to think about what it took to get these plants from here to now just popping up in a staircase in the city. So yeah, a bract is a modified leaf that's associated with a reproductive structure such as a flower. So it's a leaf that looks like a petal. But so you can see the circular bit as the bract, and then if you would zoom really close up, there's actually the floral, so the stigmas and styles and reproductive parts of a flower. So here are other famous bracts is Poinsettias. So actually when you get your poinsettias over the holidays, the red leaves are not petals, they're bracts. And this is actually also a euphorbia, so it's the same genus as the chartreuse ones. Whoops. Whoops. Sorry. Yeah, so then here we have another kind of grouping of plants. So we have Agave Blue Glow and Echium, Blue Bladder, and Euphorbia Cricus. So Euphorbia Cricus is another euphorbia, so like we were just seeing, that's native to the Balkans and Turkey, and blooms from May to June, if not longer, but no real pollinators. But it is the water does not need much water, which is really great. So that's another picture of it. And so you can see those bracts, and just that bright green chartreuse just really pops. With this whole genus, just be wary, they have a milky sap to them, which can sometimes irritate your skin. So yeah, so then Agave Blue Glow, so it's actually a hybrid, and it's a relatively small solitary agave, and it's native to Mexico. So it's an Agaveaceae and Asparagaceae. So this is one that, has, very, very low water use. So that is a helpful thing for our environment, but it doesn't bloom that often. So it doesn't actually have many pollinators. And most agaves are also monocarpic, which means that once they bloom, the mom plant will die and then the pups will keep going. So yeah, it doesn't bloom that often. But this one definitely is relatively common in the trade, but it has very stiff leaves and kind of a pokey edge to it. So it is able to play off with the softness of the other plants in the pictures. And then Echiums. So this is kind of the time for Echiums to shine. If you're going around the Bay Area, you can just see all these different Echiums in bloom, and they're just incredible for the color and just the Dr. Seuss looking of them, and people all over the world are coveting these, and they'll have them inside and try to grow them, and they self-seed everywhere, which is kind of funny to me. But so they're native to the Mediterranean region as well, and they're actually in Boraginaceae, so in the Borage family, and they bloom from May to September. And this one in particular is just so great for bees and butterflies, and that color blue as well, I think is super useful. Blue is just such a sought out color in nature because it's a little bit more rare. And yeah, so if you ever, and also the water use is very low, so it's just a great selection. So I just wanted to show a picture of borage flowers. You could kind of see that similar look to them. So then I was walking and I could see that this is Echium wild predii. And so it's not in bloom yet, but I could recognize its leaves. So I knew, for me, this is exciting to see the potential of what it will become, as it's, you can see just it's about to start just continuously growing. And what it becomes is this. So the picture on the left is actually from Longwood, and in the conservatory there, we would have Echium as display plants. So we'd have huge displays of these, and they were grown perfectly straight. And so you'd walk down a pathway with just Echium on both sides of you. And then the picture on the right is in its native environment. So it's just pretty incredible that we have these plants that are so stately and so huge, and they are just popping up everywhere. Yeah, it's just an amazing thing to be awed by as you're walking around. And if you've also ever walked by an Echium, either, any one of the different species, bees just love them, like love them. So they really are great for bees. Then in this picture, in the foreground, you can see another Echium species. So that's just, it's a genus about 70 species. So they're not always going to have the same habit by any means, but you can probably start to recognize them. and hopefully be excited about seeing them. And then in the background here in this picture, that tree with the yellow flowers, that's Fremontodendron californicum, which is in Malvaceae, which is the hibiscus family. And so that is actually a California native. So it's one of our beautiful California natives. And it's, you know, it's super showy and really stately, and is great for butterflies and for moths. And I just think it's beautiful. So one thing I do want to mention too about this picture, so on the kind of the left-hand side, you can see that Algerian ivy. So ivy actually is one of the biggest habitats for black rats. So, you know, it might be nice to have it cover a space, but there's that give and take that it really does, first of all, kind of take over, and rats love ivy. So be careful if you have ivy in your garden. Then this is Cleocactus Straussie, which, you know, walking up this staircase, the fact that there's this many things going on, and then all of a sudden you turn and you see this Cleocactus is just pretty incredible. And it's native to Bolivia, and it's in Cactaceae. And it blooms spring and summer, and the pollinators for it are hummingbirds. So it's just, you know, just pretty wild that this is just planted here. Oh, and I didn't mention, but so these steps are actually a rec and park. However, they also have a volunteer group of the neighborhood, and who really, you know, take care of it and help weed, because it's you know, there's a lot to do. So this is Aloe Hercules. So it's another native from South Africa, and it's actually a hybrid. So this is just such an incredible site to come upon. There's actually a name change of aloes, but so dendron means tree, so it's probably going to be called Alodendron Hercules. So tree aloes are now changing their genus. But to just come to this just magnificent site of 6 foot tall, and it will get even taller, aloe, you know, reaching towards the sky, is just really wonderful. And anything in quotes, so Hercules means it's a cultivar, so it's a cultivated variety. So this doesn't exist in nature, it's just in the trade. Then this I was really excited about. You might not be able to see it that well. As I was taking these pictures, I was actually on crutches, so I couldn't get super close. But so this is an Amorphophallus species. So Amorphophallus is the corpse. This is Amorphophallus titanum. So the corpse plant. This I could recognize the leaves, and there's a lot of different. There are many different species. So there's not going to be a corpse plant on the Sutter Street steps, but I could see that. Yeah, the leaves, it's some other kind of a species. And this also just brings me to, you know, our San Francisco's supposedly zone 10B 11, but this is a tropical plant. So there's always exceptions. It's kind of like any vocabulary, you know, in languages or something, that there's always exceptions to all the rules. So yeah, the fact that this is just popping up in our city, and we're not in a tropical place, is pretty incredible. So I was really excited about finding this guy. Yeah, so this is the corpse plant, which, you know, I think they, at the Conservatory of Flowers, they have one. They probably let people know when it's in bloom. And then we came to the top of the steps, and then you have Jasminum polyanthemum. So this is jasmine, as most people know, but so it's actually from China, from different provinces in China, and it's in Oleaceae, which is the olive family, and it has a long blooming period from winter to summer, and hummingbirds and bees also will pollinate it. And the Latin actually I guess Yasmin means from the heavens, which is why the genus is Yasminum. Then this is Strolitzia Nikolai. So it's another native to eastern South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and it's in Strolitzia. This plant, it's not low water use. I mean, it's medium water use. Pollinators, it does get pollinated by, by hummingbirds when it's in bloom. And it blooms generally pretty consistently throughout the year, but it'll have a peak in spring and summer. So I don't think this gives that much to the native environment, but for a plant that is going to just shout kind of tropical, subtropical palette, you can't really get much better. So it still is just such a statement piece to have, and to be able to have this combination with the jasmine and the Strolitzia, I think is pretty breathtaking. And then I found some friends when I was there. So the Parakeets of San Francisco, I've lived in, I grew up in the city, and I don't know, they were always just not in my neighborhood. So I wouldn't, I'd see them flying up ahead, but I would never really see them this close. And a whole flock of about, I don't know, 30 or 40 of these birds just landed on the trees above me when I got to the top of the steps, which was just really amazing. And hopefully if you guys go check out the staircases soon, you might see them again. And so they were actually landing on cotoneasters, which are the trees that are there, which are actually not native, but the neighbors say that they really enjoy eating the red berries. So this is another kind of interesting thought to just think about. But so this tree is not native to California, and definitely not to San Francisco. Neither are the parakeets, but they've become kind of staples of our city. So what's kind of the give and take of when we want to allow certain plants and certain species to live in our city, and kind of the relationship that they'll have with non-natives, fauna and flora. But it was incredible. You see all these birds just hanging out in these trees and in the telephone wires in the middle of the city, and it was just great. In the back here, you can see Euphorbia amac, which is that tall cactus looking plant, and that has the white to it. So if you remember the poinsettia time of a little bit earlier, so this is actually in Euphorbia as the genus. So it's the same genus as those bracts as well, which is pretty incredible. And so this is native to Saudi Arabia and Yemen. It doesn't bloom very often, doesn't have many pollinators, but has very low water use, and also that white variegation, it's called, when you have white in the leaves, is just great for anytime you go walking places at night, because then the moon will actually reflect the white, which is really beautiful. So it's still pretty incredible to see this. And then this is Agave Tenuata, Ray of Light, which is native to Mexico and is in Agaveaceae. This is another one that is pretty common in the trade, but is just so gorgeous, and it has those soft succulent leaves. So it has a pretty low water use, and it can handle sun or light shade. And just those leaves just look like someone took a paintbrush to it, and they're just so gorgeous. So that cultivar in particular, you'll see around. It's another monocarpic plant, so it'll bloom once, and then the pups will carry on while the mama dies. And when it is in bloom, hummingbirds do pollinate it. And then this is Geranium Matarens. So this is a giant geranium. So it's from the Madeira Islands. And so if you know kind of common garden geraniums, this is the same family and the same genus, in fact, but just ginormous. So if you've ever walked around Golden Gate Park in the springtime, you'll probably start seeing these popping up, and you can start to recognize the leaves. Kind of what I enjoy doing is walking around, and then you can start to recognize the leaves, and it'll just give you a sense of anticipation that in the future you can come back and see an explosion of flowers. So it's pretty incredible that we get to just casually see these guys around. And bees love to nuzzle in these guys. And then, so on a parallel street, while I was taking the pictures for this, I actually had knee surgery pretty recently, so I was on crutches, so I wasn't able to do my whole full walk that I usually would do. But what that made me do is I had to come back down, and then I was walking to my car, and I wouldn't have usually gone that way, but just a little bit further down was a whole nother staircase right parallel to the Saturn Street steps. But this one is actually just a street itself. And so it's not a Recon Park, but all the gardens themselves are homeowners. So they're homeowners' gardens that they just face inwards, and they allow the public to walk through them. So it's pretty incredible that we live in a place where the community takes care of their gardens so much and allows the public to be able to enjoy them as well. But so the Saturn Street steps was that whole planting, and most of those plants, you know, full sun, low water, a lot of succulents, very much that kind of plant palette. And then on this staircase, it was a very different, shady, a lot more Japanese style plants, cottage garden, European, cut flowers, and coniferous. So just by taking a little stroll down the street, you all of a sudden are switched into a completely different plant palette, which just very much showcases just the microclimates and the differences that we're able to see in plantings in the city. So here you can see a beautiful rhododendron coming into bloom, and some scilla, as well as Acer palmatums, which are the Japanese maples. So probably most people have seen a Japanese maple or two. They are relatively common landscaping plants, but there are so many different cultivars. So you'll always see, you know, a green one that's dissected, a red one that's dissected, a miniature one, a yellow one, a pink and white one. So there's just so many of them. They all have different names. So also this was just really sweet to see were spring ephemerals. So those are generally bulbs that we, you know, they generally need stratification, which means that they need a little bit of a cold in winter for them to really succeed. But that being said, here they are. You have Narcissus ceylon as well as Muscari armeniacum. And so someone has planted these, and they've come up. So it's, again, just one of those things where these rules of, oh, we won't really be able to grow these plants, but here they are. But in fact, often they'll bloom, but they might not multiply. So in colder environments, narcissus will naturalize, which means they'll just start forming more and more and more of themselves, and they might not do that to the same extent in the city, but still so sweet to see these guys. And so you can see the narcissus, which are native to Europe and North Africa, and the muscari, which are the little blue guys, which are native to Southeastern Europe and are in Liliaceae. So bulbs in general, you know, a bulb is a storage of water and starch. So, you know, they're not super, super high water use, but it's definitely not a low water use plant. So it's a medium. So yeah, here's that Acer palmatum red dragon, which is this dwarf weeping dissected cultivar, which is just really gorgeous to see. So here's another photo, so you can see this Leukodendron on the side, and just how the homeowners, you know, on the right, they didn't make their fence 7 feet tall. They're allowing for the public to look in, which is really nice of them. So this also is just really awesome to see. You have that Acer palmatum, which is this, you know, very shade Japanese maple, and then this sedum, which is a succulent, and having that plant palette be able to be mixed is just really cool to see. So yeah, when you just start seeing the mixtures of plants that are able to be combined together to create beauty, I think it actually increases your appreciation for how beautiful that is, because not everywhere would they be able to combine those two things. And here again, you know, you have that red Japanese maple, and then on the right-hand side in that corner, that's a Quercus agrifolia, which is our native oak. And then in the back, there's that Chilean wine palm, so the Jubea. So just, you know, just being able to in one shot see all these different things is pretty incredible. And then this was interesting to me because it was a classic cut flower garden, in that you can see these are dahlia leaves coming up in the front. And I think it was just a good example of, if someone wants a cut flower garden, you know, it's not something that is in color year round, but they really have set it up so, you know, in the summer, I'm going to come back here definitely in the fall and summer, because it's just going to be an amazing dahlia garden. But right now you can see it's the moment for the narcissus and the hyacinth as well. But this is definitely something that needs to be irrigated. So cut flower garden is kind of like a little bit more like a farm in some ways. So definitely needs irrigation for these guys. And then you keep going up, and then you're in a grove of our amazing redwoods, just a little bit further up the staircase, which was just incredible. So just to really move through a lot of different moments. And there's some cool staircases within a staircase and pathways, and there's just verdant green textures as I made my way back down. And then kind of at the end of this, you can always just go right back to, this is Carlin Cole and Cole Valley, which is another just great little place to feel energy and be part of the community and just be in a city. So just you can jump right back into city life and kind of just almost forget that you ever went through this experience of, yeah, these staircases. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I've got for you guys. I hope you have enjoyed this and that you will keep exploring the city and just keep being curious about everything that you see, as it will continue to, I think, enhance appreciation for beautiful spaces and just make us aware of how lucky we are for living in such a beautiful place. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zena. We did have some questions come in during your presentation, so I'll go ahead and field those to you now. The first question was from Sharon, and she asked, when you design gardens with non-native plants, do you ensure you are not introducing invasive species?
Yes, I mean, that's something definitely that I take very seriously. So there's a certain amount of, there's a lot of research that goes into what we're going to be buying, as well as my boss has been in the trade for 40 plus years. So he has the experience of knowing what something is invasive and what something's not. That being said, I would be wary, because that doesn't mean that nurseries aren't selling things that are invasive. So if you see something, like you might see, they still, you know, French broom at nurseries sometimes. So just something might gain your, you know, it looks really pretty, but just do a little bit of research and you can pretty quickly learn if something's going to take over or not. So yes, I do take that very seriously.
Okay, good. And then Seda asked if you could just reshare the starting place of where you started our walk today.
Yeah, so I can go back to that slide. But so I started in the Castro, and yeah, and then you go here, I'll get to that, the map. And I have to admit, as I was planning for this, I was on crutches. So I've done this walk many times, but I drove to the base of the staircase this time. But yeah, so you can see this is 17th Street. And this is Market Street. So this is Diamond. So Castro is, I believe, 2 down from there. So from Castro, you can just take a left on Market Street, and then you'll get to honestly right at Castro and Market. And I can send another map, but so maybe bring some water or snacks with you. And then you take a right on Ord Street, and then you'll find the Saturn Street steps. And then down Ord a little bit, and then I came back down. And then downward was where that other staircase is.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. Julia asked if you know who has planted the plants that we saw today, and who maintains them.
So I tried to figure that out. So it's Rec and Park space. However, kind of what I was gathering from my, brief talk with someone from Rec and Park is that, the gardener who takes care of it probably has multiple spaces that they're responsible for. So what does that mean for this gardener in particular? I don't know exactly, but it might be just being visited once a week by a city gardener. And I think there's a history to it that I'm curious about, but I wasn't able to find a huge amount of information about. But I believe the homeowners probably did a decent amount of the planting and maintaining.
Okay, and oh yes, Carol asked, and I can answer this question, if we were recording this, and we are. And so for anyone who missed my earlier spiel, we will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered for this outing. And in that email, we'll include a link to the recording. So look out for that in your inbox. And if for some reason you don't get that email or it ends up in your spam folder, we also put all of our recordings on our website, which you can find under past events. So another place to check for that. Alrighty, and moving on, let's see. Julia asked, how do you recommend amateur botanists? I also recently moved to SF from Western North Carolina, totally new plans here, to self-educate. And could you recommend books, classes, or other educational opportunities?
Sorry, I think my internet went out a little bit. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. Basically, Julia's just asking, what can you recommend to amateur botanists to learn more as far as books, classes, or other educational opportunities go?
Yeah, I mean, the botanical gardens in San Francisco and in Berkeley are great resources. It's definitely helpful if you walk around a space and there's plant names, because then you can start to learn what they are. So I would do that. And at both of those places, there's just, they have extensive libraries. I have to admit that my horticulture education didn't really, I was amazed by the plants here, but I was not here when I had much of my education. So I don't know a huge amount of programs, but I would start with the botanical gardens, and they probably have great resources for programs.
Great. Well, that wraps up the questions that were in the queue. I realize we're going to end maybe a little bit early, but that's nice because I hear it's very nice in the Bay Area today, depending on where you are. I know there's a bunch of microclimates. And so, yeah, for folks who are interested in climate change, which I know Zena touched on a little bit as far as, how our plants in San Francisco and on our walk today make an impact, but we're also having a webinar coming up with a climate leader on May 26th, and that's being led by our advocacy manager, Justin Wang. He'll be talking about drought with Dr. Nusha Ajami from the Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment. So if you are interested in that, I highly encourage you to RSVP, and you can find more information about that event and our other events on our website at greenbelt.org/events. And Ken, any other announcements or things to share?
No, that's great program, Zena. And
Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful Saturday. Take care.
Thank you.